Working Cows Podcast, episode 167.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Conry, host of the Working Cows Podcast, here with another episode for you guys, powered by the Global Ag Network. And going solo here today, just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have been on my mind, some of the things I've been thinking about, some of the things I've been learning in this first season of management. We moved on to the place where we are living here in, West Central South Dakota, in October of 2019. We brought in my dad's cows and calved them out, and then after that, they left in the end of April, first part of May. I guess they left in the middle of May, and then we brought in some outside yearlings and a few crippled cows, and we worked with them. We moved them every day, and so I've learned some things, so I want to talk to you about some of those things, but I also want to talk to you about our greatest asset. What is our greatest asset? What's the first thing that we should be thinking about as this is the greatest possession we have to pass on to our kids? So that's kind of an outline of where we're going for today's episode. I also want to make you aware of on the front end, me and my wife and I are going to be at the Ranching for Profit School in Cheyenne, January 17th through the 23rd. That is one seat left in that school. So this will be out early in the week of the 14th, and there's one seat left. So if you call right away, you might be able to get in, or at least get at the top of the waiting list. With a class of 50 or so people, I'd be surprised if there isn't some turnover on the waiting list and an opportunity, even if you're at the top of that waiting list, to get in. So the number to call, 307-213-6010, 307-213-6010, 307-213-6010. That'll be in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/167. I've got about 5 of the camp mugs, the stainless steel engraved camp mugs that I'm sending out to Patreon supporters who join at the $20 per month level or more. You can give one time each year, and if that works for you, you want to give at that level. I've got about 5 of those mugs left I could send out. So if you go on to patreon.com/workingcows and sign up there, I'll send you out a gift on the front end of your membership. So, and look forward to getting some other things. I've got hats coming, another round of hats coming in January, and then I've got a pretty cool t-shirt that I need to get done, and it'll be a Working Cows Podcast World Tour t-shirt with some of the guests from around the world that we've had. So enough about that. Let's talk about our greatest asset. What is the greatest asset that we have to pass on to the next generation coming up behind us? What is the greatest asset that we have to give to those folks who are underneath us, who are either related to us or who are working for us, whatever capacity we're in? What is it that we have to pass on to them that we should be really concerned about? What's the number one thing that we should be concerned about passing on? I will say, aside from a knee bowed to the lordship of Jesus, the greatest asset that we should be passing on is not land, because, as you all know, land is the cause of much conflict in many families. Many families have been torn apart fighting over what's left when the generation who was in charge of, who had the name on the paperwork, passes away. Many families have been torn apart fighting over land, and that's pretty sad. Soil and grass and water and all the things connected to the land. They can be sentimental, they can be important, but man, they sure are not more important than people who share a last name, people who have the same blood running through their veins, and we want to keep that in perspective as much as possible. And that's one of the many reasons why land is not the most important asset that we're going to pass on. Money, it's not money. Again, what do people fight over when that generation passes on? What do people fight over? They fight over the land. They fight over the money. It's not money, as one rancher shared when I was at the Holistic Management Canada 2020 conference earlier this year. They were having a Q&A discussion on Sunday afternoon during the Holistic Management part of that conference that was held in conjunction with Organic Alberta. And one of the ranchers there said, we tend to make money going up the stairs, and then we lose money falling down the elevator shaft. So, kind of that easy come, easy go, or maybe hard come, easy go kind of a thing. On the really, really good years, we make a lot of money and we do it really quickly. And on the bad years, we can lose it faster than we made it. So we shouldn't look at our land, we shouldn't look at our money as the number one asset that we're passing on. We shouldn't look at our genetics as the number one asset that we're passing on. As far as what I mean by that, as far as cow genetics is concerned, I think they're something that can be replaced pretty quickly through different technologies that we've gotten pretty proficient at. Recip, embryo recip, and AI, artificial insemination, and selecting bulls based on their traits and their qualities. And I don't think it's genetics that we should be trying to pass on. I don't think that's the most important asset that we have under our management. What is the most important asset that we have to pass on? Again, as I said, aside from a knee bowed to the lordship of Jesus, it's management ability. The most important asset that we have to pass on to the next generation, to those people under us who are either working for us or share a last name with us or both, is management ability. Why is that? Why is management ability the most important thing? Well, first of all, management ability, if we are instilling that ability in our kids and in our people that are part of our businesses, they can take that and it can serve them for the rest of their life. Anywhere they go, they can be served by that management ability. It will help them in whatever area of life they choose to go into. If they're not managing grass, sunshine, water, cows, livestock, infrastructure, if they're not managing any of those things that go along with managing a ranch, it'll still serve them well. They can be better managers of the resources that are entrusted to them. They can look at those resources more holistically. They can take a little bit better view of those resources that they have entrusted to them. So it'll serve them for the rest of their life. Managing land can improve anything, and emphasis on anything. Managing land can improve any type of land is what I mean when I say managing land can improve anything. And I think there's a couple of lessons to be learned there. First of all, if you weren't on Steve Kenyon's first virtual networking webinar, make sure you're liking his page at Greener Pastures Ranching. He'll have announcements coming up. I think he's going to try and do them every Wednesday. And so he's trying to kind of replace that conference networking feel. And the last one, I bounced out of the last one after it had been going for about 2.5 hours. I had to get my kids to bed, but there were still people in the room and they were still talking. I don't know how long it went afterwards, but it was good. It was a really good opportunity, and he's got a topic set up for each one. The one coming up this week on Wednesday the 16th is on bale grazing. The one coming up last week was on building biology, and he had Nicole Masters on for that discussion. So if you haven't been a part of that, check out Greener Pastures Ranching Facebook page. You can go up on there and get signed up. But back to improving anything through our management, improving any kind of land. Steve shared a story about growing soil on concrete. He said, this chunk of concrete was, I think it was an old confinement barn of some kind, dairy or hog or whatever it was, and it was now no longer in use, and it was in the way, but it was expensive to tear up and get rid of, and so he was frustrated by it. There was nothing left, just the concrete pad laying there. And so one year he bale grazed across that. And he said in a couple of years, we had grass growing on top of that concrete. So management ability can improve any kind of land. And so I think the second lesson to be learned from that fact that you can improve any kind of land through your management ability is that you should not be a victim. Don't allow yourself to fall prey to that victim mentality. Don't allow yourself to fall prey to the this piece of land is no good. It's not the right type. It's heavy clay. It's too heavy clay, which is what I've got. I've got very heavy clay soils where I'm at. Hard pan gumbo. It's pretty crazy. You dig a trench in that stuff, and the sides are shiny. So it gets hard. It gets like a brick. It cracks. It opens up big time. It's tough soil, but we shouldn't be a victim of our soil. We should happen to our soil, not let our soil happen to us. And whatever, you can complain about anything. This is too sandy. It blows away. If we even think about overgrazing it, if we even think about leaving the cows there 2 hours longer than they should have been there, all of it's gonna end up in the neighbor's land. And we can be a victim of any kind of situation, circumstance, resource, whatever is entrusted to us. If it wasn't for these people, I'd be a better manager. No, not true. You need to improve your management ability. You need to do what you can to sharpen your management axe and take time to invest in yourself. Take time to invest in yourself as far as sharpening your management axe is concerned. And if you do that, if you're willing to do that, you can improve anything. You can improve any resource that has been entrusted to you. Paying attention to where money goes. If you have management ability with money, you will probably learn that there's more of it there than you thought. There's a lot more to go around than you thought. And so there's opportunity there to pay attention, manage the economics and the finances that you have had entrusted to you, and to pay attention to those things and see where every dollar's going. Every dollar has a name at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the year, however far in advance you're able to or required to based on your income is whatever your income is structured like. You need to give every dollar a name at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the year, and send it to its place. And part of that should be generosity, and part of that should be savings for the future. And the first section, the first few chapters of Dave Pratt's new book, The Turnaround, A Rancher's Story, is a great example of that, a great examination of some of the principles that are taught in the Ranching for Profit School. It is now the pre-work book for the Ranching for Profit School, so my wife and I have been reading through that on our trips to town. It's 70 miles to the nearest grocery store where milk doesn't cost $6 a gallon. So, so we take some long trips, and we've been reading that book to each other on some of those trips, and it's really good. Does a very good job in text, in a conversation format between the couples that are represented in the book, of laying out some of those ways of thinking about money. And so we want to give every dollar a name on paper on purpose at the beginning of the month. And yeah, I'm borrowing this language from Dave Ramsey, but he's got a proven system, and he's worth looking at. So those are some of the things that I would say. Management ability is more important than land. Management ability is more important than money. And another thing, genetics. Genetics can be replaced with money. You can buy in outside genetics. You can use technologies like AI and embryo recip and some of those different things to kickstart that genetic climb. Also, I think that a lot of times the bang for the buck that we are sold as far as genetics is concerned is probably a little bit more marketing than it is actual ability, or to say it another way, it's more sizzle than it is steak. And I guess we could probably say literally in this scenario. And let me go out on a limb here and say, at the risk of being offensive, but let me go out on a limb here and say that unless you're good at managing people, land, and money, you probably shouldn't be worried about genetics. I'll just let that sit there for a second. Unless you're good at managing people first, land, and money, and if I'm going to put this in order of the ones that are the biggest failures, the ones that most often cause failures in ranching businesses, I should probably say, unless you're good at managing people, money, and land, you probably shouldn't be worried about genetics. Steve Campbell in his school, and I think we touched on this on the podcast, did a great job of laying out the fact that that genetics, quote unquote, genetics are the least correlation to profitability. And the way he laid it out, if I remember these numbers right, are 40% of your profit is getting a calf on the ground every year. This is why we cull open cows. This is why we cull cows that don't bring a calf to weaning. This is why, as Kit Farrow says, we don't make an excuse for any cow. So 40% of profit is getting a calf to weaning every year. 30% is what does it cost you to raise that calf. So this is where we look at the efficiency of the cow. We look at her ability to convert the least amount of forage to the most amount of pounds of beef, and that is of her offspring. So the more efficient cows, the cows that don't take as much input to raise the same amount of pounds of beef, and not every pound is created equal. Dave Pratt's got great videos on the Ranching for Profit YouTube video on that. Not all pounds are created equal. What do you get paid for the first 400 pounds? What do you get paid for the next 150? What do you get paid for the 150 after that? And it's usually gets smaller as you go ahead, and you start to be upside down on some of those pounds from, say 500 to 650 and 650 to 700 or 750. You tend to be upside down on what it cost you to get those pounds. So you want to find the most efficient female. 40% of your profit is what is bringing in a calf to weaning every year, having that cow bring a calf to weaning every year. 30% is what did it cost you to raise that? Is she an efficient critter? Does she produce pounds with less forage than her herd mates? Those are the cows you want to find. 20% is what did you get paid for that calf? You wean the calf, even weaning the calf on the truck, send it to the sale barn, just the total typical way of taking care of getting that animal to market, doing the least as far as adding value to that animal. And I'm not saying in a positive or negative light. I'm just saying if you take that calf straight off the cow, put it on a truck, send it to the sale barn that day, get a check in your hand by 3:00 in the afternoon, that accounts for 20% of your profit every year. 40% is getting that calf to weaning. 30% is that calf's mama an efficient critter? What did it cost you to raise that calf? 20% of your profit is what did you get paid that day that it got sold. And then only 10% of your profit every year is how does that critter grade? How does that critter marble? How does that critter hang? Carcass merits. So just think about this. And maybe I'm totally open to the idea that maybe 10% of ranch profitability in the American beef herd is carcass merits because not many people are retaining ownership. That's totally possible. Maybe that's it. But just think about the advertisements that you see in your typical industry magazine. What are they selling you? What are they telling you is the solution to your profitability problems? More weight and better carcass, right? Am I wrong? You can tell me if I'm wrong. You can send me an email. You can log on to workingcows.net/contact. Send me an email. You can go to facebook.com/workingcows. Send me a message. You can go to twitter.com/ypclayconry, and you can even put in a public @reply message and tell the whole world that I'm an idiot. So I could take it. Fire away. But what are they trying to sell you? They're trying to sell you on pounds, and that's in the form of vaccines and porons that will help with parasite loads that will result in more pounds. And they're trying to sell you genetics. They're trying to sell you on the idea that you need better carcass quality. Well, unless you're retaining ownership, I don't think you're getting paid for better carcass quality unless you find that repeat customer to come out in the country or come to the sale barn and buy your calves year after year after year after year. Maybe then he's there and he's driving up your price $10 to $20 100 weight per year. I don't know. I don't know any of these statistics other than what I've heard other people share. I don't know any of these. I don't know any of these numbers off the top of my head. I'm just saying, if 40% is getting the calf to the sale barn every year, 30% is what it cost you to raise the calf, 20% is what did the calf weigh that day, and 10% is the carcass merit of that critter. Look at the advertisements. They're trying to advertise to you and sell you on those things. And I would say, generally speaking, they're the most expensive. But I repeat myself, most advertised, most expensive. Why do you think they're the most advertised? Because they're the most expensive. Why are they the most expensive? Because there's the highest profit margin there for the industry. And I'll try to track down Steve Kenyon's graph that he shares, and it's not his graph, but it's a Canadian agriculture graph of net profit for the beef, or for the agriculture industry profit, agricultural business profit, and then agriculturalists and their profit, the producers versus the businesses. And there's a little clue as to why the issue is what it is. The producers should be managing as business people, and then maybe they would approach their business a little bit differently. But then also, when we look at ourselves as producers, what do producers produce? They produce a product. What is that product? Usually it's so easy to fall into that trap of believing that pounds pay and that pounds are the answer, and more pounds, more pounds, more pounds. Well, maybe what did it cost you? What did it cost you? And there's some great common sense resources out there. Burke Tigert, we talked about this a little bit on his episode that I did with him for episode 100 of the Working Cows podcast, where he talked a little bit about when would you get concerned, like with an open rate. What open rate would you be concerned with? And I can't remember. I think it was 85%. If it's under 85%, or if you've got more than 15% open, you might want to start looking at some of the supplement issues that you've got going on there, and some of the grass quality issues that you've got going on there. And then I think he said if it's over like 93% or so, he would maybe start thinking maybe you're feeding them too much, maybe you're spending too much, and those last percentages, they just keep getting more and more expensive and more and more expensive. So something to think about. So least correlation of profitability is the genetics. What does that animal weigh when it is weaned, and what are its carcass merits? Most correlation to profit is 40% getting that calf to weaning, and 30% an efficient mama that can raise that calf on less forage than her herd mates. So those are the things that we should be looking at. So genetics, probably not on the list of things that we should be managing. So what would you do if you're not going to manage genetics? If you're not going to flip through the bull sale catalog and circle the bulls that you want? And honestly, for me, I don't think I could circle the bulls I want based on the numbers, especially after attending Steve Campbell's class, I would have to go out and look at them and apply some of what he talked about, that sloped tail process, the slope from hooks to pins, a bull walking uphill as he walking uphill on level ground, whereas the female you want walking downhill on level ground. You want the bull to get bigger as he goes forward towards his shoulders, and you want the cow to get smaller. And if you want cows that are getting smaller as she goes forward or getting bigger as she goes back, you've got to find those bulls that are getting bigger as they go forward, and you got to find those bulls that are getting smaller as they go back. So it's the opposite, and you want to fix issues in your herd. I think, according to Steve, you find those genetics. And so I don't know that I could look at the numbers and circle the bull I want. I'd have to go out and lay eyes on him. At least what he was sharing makes sense to me, and I appreciate what he was sharing, and I appreciate Bart Carmichael from Wedge Tent Angus for putting that on and giving people the opportunity to come out and look at that, and giving people an opportunity to come to his place and examine some of his cattle and see what he's been doing. And hopefully years and years of thoughtful breeding has been producing some of those critters that fit that mode. And I think they are, and I think they're going to continue to get better. So, but if you're not going to go to the bull sale, if you're not going to circle that critter that you think you want based on the eye test, based on the numbers, whatever it is, what would you do instead? Well, I think you could bring in outside cattle, manage the cattle, manage the cash flow, manage the economics, manage the finance, manage the land, manage the people to get all of those logistics done, and all the bases covered, all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. Bring in outside cattle. If you want to follow the no risk ranching of Greg Judy, bring in outside cattle on leased land, and lease the land by the acre and sell the land by the head, and then allow your management ability to put money in your pocket by being able to run more cattle on that land. In many cases, I got to qualify it, it depends, right? In many cases, year one, being able to run more cattle on that land because you have because you're moving them more frequently, you're not using up the grass, you're moving it away before they've taken all the residue, you're allowing them to take that top third of the plant and move on, getting the best part of the plant. So bring in outside cattle. Livestock, wouldn't just have to be cattle. Manage time and space. Manage photosynthesis. Increase water holding capacity. Get your land healthy with somebody else's cattle so that you don't have the risk of all of those risks that go along with managing cow herds. And I'll talk about some of the lessons I learned in that ways. And I say lessons. Some people would call it a failure. I'll call it a lesson. But in just a minute, we'll talk about some of those. So bring in outside cattle, manage time and space, manage photosynthesis, increase water holding capacity, get your land healthy, and then think about genetics. And I'll say this again, get your land healthy, get your money management skills healthy, get your people management skills healthy, and then think about genetics. Then that's what Greg Judy's done. He's leased all this land. He's gotten his management down, and I'll link to a video about that, or maybe it did come up in our podcast in the episode I did with Greg Judy. I think it did come up that they're now raising their own critters. They now own the animals that are on that landscape, and they're managing the genetics, and they're making some money off of those genetics. They're selling, I think, females and maybe even some bulls. So, and maybe after a few years of managing time and space, bringing in outside livestock, managing photosynthesis, increasing water holding capacity, you'll figure out that cows, Florida is your cup of tea, is a great fit for your family. That, that as we talked about with Jeff Ramsire, corn, soybeans, Florida be in the rotation for a lot of farmers. Maybe cows, Florida is the rotation for you. And maybe you want to bring in cows in May and depending on where you're at, you may be blessed with a growing season that starts before the end of May. I am not. But maybe you want to bring in cows in May and keep them till October, and then get out of there. Take the family and go home. You can homeschool anywhere. So do whatever you want, but maybe you'll find out this is a great lifestyle and we don't have to be here. We don't have to chop ice. We don't have to worry about any of those things. We don't have to bury our water lines 6 feet deep because we blow them out at the end of the growing season. We're done. I don't know. Just maybe that's something that you'll find. So kind of bringing this full circle, and we'll talk about what I learned here as we move towards wrapping up. And you know what it means when a preacher says as we move towards wrapping up, right? Nothing at all. Not a darn thing. So anyways, what are you doing? What are you doing to sharpen your management axe? If the most important asset that you have to pass on is not your land, not your money, not your animals, but it's your management ability, what are you doing to sharpen your management axe? What are you doing to go out and to improve your ability to manage those resources? Managing people. What are you doing to improve your ability to manage people, to manage land, to manage money? What are you doing to to sharpen your management axe? And I think that's where we need to start looking, is improving our ability to manage the resources that are entrusted to us. And the first one that we need to think about is people. And we need to look at what we're doing as passing on management ability, not passing on assets. And if we do that, maybe we'll raise up a generation, or maybe we'll raise up people that are working for us who want to go out and become self-feeders, and we can bring in somebody else and we can train them, and we can improve their management ability as well. And if we do that, if we focus on improving our ability to manage the resources, and we focus on improving the abilities of those within our sphere of influence, especially those that are sharing a last name with us, or those people whose front of the paycheck we are signing, if we will focus on those things and sharpening our ability to manage those assets, we are setting them up for success for the rest of their life. When they leave us, they will be equipped to go anywhere they want and manage any set of resources they want more effectively, more holistically, looking at the whole rather than looking at the individual silos and not understanding how each of those individual silos is connected, and how when we pull something out of this silo, it affects all of those other silos. And so we want to sharpen our management axe, and in so doing, when we do that, we will be giving everyone who's connected to our sphere of influence the ability to manage more effectively, and we'll be setting them up to go anywhere, and they can find any degraded piece of land, any piece of concrete that is out there that's been farmed until there's no nutrients left in it, and they can take that piece of land and they can regenerate it with their management ability, and they can do it with other people's cattle, and then maybe they'll figure out cows. Florida is a great lifestyle for me. So that's one thing I wanted to share with you today, is what are you doing to sharpen your management axe? Maybe think about the fact that what you really have to pass on isn't land, it isn't money, it isn't genetics, it's management ability, and to start looking at how you can do that. Now I want to talk to you about what I learned, some of the things I learned, and there was a lot more than what I'm going to be able to come up with for you today. But what I learned this summer, first of all, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was an opportunity to see a lot of what I've been hearing other people say for the last 3 years. Just crossed at the first part of November, just crossed 3 years of managing, of hosting the Working Cows podcast. And so for the last 3 years, I've been hearing people tell me all these different things about what cattle can do for the land, what you can do with electric fencing, how quickly animals will learn that you are coming here in this rhythm and you're moving them to this fresh piece of grass and they'll catch on to it. It's all, at least as far as I can tell at this point, it's all true. and one of the things that I learned is that electric fence is fencing for the 21st century. And I know it's been around since whatever, the 80s, 90s. But electric fence is fencing for the 21st century. It works. It works. We brought in 50-something head of outside cattle, some crippled pairs and some yearling heifers and a 2-year-old steer and a couple other things. And then we ran our own cows with them. And we trained them. We used some of the tips and tricks. We put the hot wire right over the water wire, right over the water point. And so when they put their nose in there, got a drink, it wasn't, they could get in and out without dragging their nose across it, but it was right close there, so that if they got curious and went over there with a wet nose and sniffed that 9-wire Polyflex poly braid wire on, I think when I first started, we were still on a 2-joule charger. If they got curious and went over there and sniffed that, pow, they got nailed. And that was good training. So we had them locked up for a couple of days and trained them on that. But then we turned them out and we started rotating them. And even the 6-wire PowerFlex, which I kind of like a lot. It's a really thin, I saw Brian Alexander, the Red Hills Rancher, in a Facebook discussion one time say my cows will stay in with dental floss if they think it's hot. Well, especially when I've got sunglasses on, the 6-wire PowerFlex polybraid is almost dental floss. It's really hard to see, but even that, I never had them get out of it. If it was on, and that's a really loose qualification, I will say this is an indisputable fact. I had cows go out through through barbed wire fence more this year than I did through single wire electric fence. That is indisputable. I mean, you can dispute it. I don't have 2 or 3 witnesses to stand here and tell you that that's the truth, but it's the truth of my experience this year. I had more cows go out through 3 and 4 barbed wire fence than I did go out through single wire poly electric fence with step-in posts usually put in every 60 feet. So it was fun. It was fun to see that work. It was fun to see them catch on to it. I would say towards the end of the year, we were moving more on time, like to get them back to our house by the end of the year. By the end of the grazing season, we were moving more just to move them along and get them back by the end of the grazing season than we were moving when the forage was used up. So they were not as ready to move every time we went out there as they had been. It took a little coaxing sometimes because there was still plenty of grass left there. But they were held in even by 6-wire poly braid from PowerFlex. So pretty thin stuff, pretty small stuff. I will say it's a miracle. 21st century fencing. I say 21st century fencing, and what I have in mind there is a slide that Dallas Mount showed us in the High Plains Ranch practicum of somebody who apparently got frustrated with the neighbor's sheep or the neighbor's bull or something. I don't know. And they put in like 7 posts in 30 feet or something like that, and 4, 5, 6 strands of barbed wire. He's like, you don't have to fence like it's 100 years ago. You can use 21st century fencing. And I'll say it's dang near a miracle, man. And especially we brought in 25 ewes last year in March. We picked up 25 ewes. They were set to lamb in May, and they're still there. We've still got the lambs on them, but we bought sheep because I'm such a great manager. Back to what I was just talking about. We bought sheep before we had sheep fencing. So I bought 7 of the nets. Are they Oh, Premier One. Yeah, the Premier One. 7 of the Premier One nets. I bought the shorter ones. I don't remember what the difference. I think it's 35-inch nets, 9 wires, and 35 inches or whatever it is. I bought 7 of those, and we would. I'm kind of I kind of like squares. I like shapes to be actually what they're supposed to be. So we would try to build a rectangle and then split it in half and move them whenever the forage ran out. And man, you can build fence with that. You can build fence in some crazy spots and hold sheep in some crazy spots, whether it's terrain that's a limitation or whether it's a little corner that doesn't have any fence around it. Man, you can build fence in some crazy spots. And to go along with that, we were running that on a 2 joule solar system that I've had first piece of electric fencing equipment I ever bought was the X2 system, StayFix X2 system. So we had that, and then 3 of the T-shaped ground rods. I think they're 30 inches. And we had that, and you could get quite a few volts running through that net fencing. So it's good stuff. 21st century fencing. I'm all about it. Electric fence, is good stuff. And I'm excited to continue to up my game as far as that's concerned. Been good stuff. I've only had so far, all we've had are the Gallagher reels. I do really like the option that the Gallagher reel has for the locking mechanism to lock that reel onto your 4-wheeler or whatever you've got. We drive a 1999 Yamaha Big Bear 350 that my wife has had since she was in middle school. And we always say it's very paid for. Every vehicle we have is very paid for. So we like that about them. So anyways, whatever you've got, I really like that locking mechanism on those Gallagher reels. But yeah, those are the ones we've had. And the one thing I do like, I'll say before I forget, about the 6-wire PowerFlex is that you can get a half a mile of that stuff on a quarter or third mile reel, whatever the smaller reel size is. You can get a half a mile of that stuff on those smaller reels from Gallagher. And that's pretty cool. It's not near as bulky as the maxi reel, which is big. But yeah, so those are some of the things that we had, and we had all. I bought that first big order of stuff I put in for electric fencing stuff. When I first had finished the High Plains Ranch practicum, we bought 100 of the O'Brien step-in multi-wire posts, and so that's what we fenced with all year. Good stuff. Really like all of it. There are some challenges with the O'Brien posts if you're not doing multiple species that you could probably go with a ring top, but there's a lot of flexibility with those O'Brien posts that I really like. So something else I learned: cows learn quickly. Cows learn quickly. They're easy to train as long as you've got a well-grounded, powerful charger. They're easy to train, and they learn real quickly, and they pick up on it pretty quickly, and it's cool. It's cool to see them catch on, and not hard to do. My encouragement to you is, if you want to try it, you can do it. If I can figure it out, anybody can. So very good stuff. Let's talk about a failure. This is a lesson in my mind, but some people call it a failure. Definitely was a failure of cow depreciation. Yeah, ouch. Managing nutrients is key. Managing nutrients is key, and some of the things that go along with that is capturing energy. And this maybe is maybe a little too far outside the box, maybe so far outside the box it's wrong, but I'll say it, and you can again give me some feedback at the channels I mentioned before if you want to. But summer swath grazing, and maybe not even so much summer swath grazing as capturing nutrients before they're all gone. And we are in heavily dominated cool season grass country where I'm at. In fact, I would say 80% of the species I've got growing on this place right now are crested wheatgrass, Russian crested wheatgrass, and that's a lot of what I've got growing where I'm at. And so very much turns and the nutrients leave it quickly. So yeah, managing nutrients is key. So I don't know, maybe even think about cutting down and letting those swaths cure out and grazing them even still during the growing season. Even if you cut them early, then you get them off there before the grass kills out underneath that swath and give it a chance to regrow. Hat tip to Shane Barber from Barber Industries, purveyor of fine cattle drinkers, cattle waterers that you can move with a skid steer or a bale bed, and water big herds of cattle on them with a huge reserve storage tank. He's the one that kind of turn that on to me. And if I'm misunderstanding you, Shane, defend yourself in the comments section and let everybody know that I'm misconstruing what you said. But it is a powerful idea, I think. We had some neighbors who had to cross our land to get to their back hayfield to haul the hay off and to do all that. And so they offered to cut. We've got 13 acres of alfalfa and grass, and it is, as I said, crested wheatgrass, alfalfa and crested wheat, and they offered to cut it for us in exchange for crossing the land, and I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, so it's cut earlier than we probably would have for swath grazing, but we've got the cows out on it right now. They've been out on it since I think, I don't remember if it was the first part of October when we turned them in on that, and they're doing great. They're loving it. They are following us out there every time we walk out there to move them. We're strip grazing away from water. They'll be probably close to half a mile from the water by the time we get to the other end of this hayfield. But they're loving it, and they're doing really well on it. So that's definitely swath grazing is cool. Been really enjoying that. We're going to move into bale grazing right before we go to ranching for profit, so that when my in-laws come to stay with our kids while we're gone to ranching for profit, they won't have to do anything but make sure the water is not frozen. So everything will be on bale grazing and be taken care of that way. So that's another benefit of these things, is it frees you up a little bit more in the winter when you might have to be feeding cattle every day. If you're moving cows to feed, you can set them up with more food than you might normally want to do, just to manage the distribution of the manure. But you can set them up with more food and go away if you need to. So managing nutrients is key. Maybe think about even swath grazing. If you're dominated by one season of grass, maybe think about swath grazing at different times of the year than traditionally would be. And how do you call swath grazing traditional? But you know what I mean. Anyways, here's the failure though. So my dad's cows were on this piece of ground until middle of May, maybe. And so we had quite a bit of growing season left after they left. But they were there until the middle of May. So we had some growing season before they left. And so I took my cows, and I just had a few of them. I had 3 replacement heifers and 6 cows, 6 aged cows, 3 4-year-old cows. And I turned them in on that spot, and we were strip grazing with them. And it was probably early to be strip grazing. First of all, there's first failure. And it was right next to the road. So I told my wife, I like to make all my grazing mistakes right next to the road so everybody can see it. So we put these cows out there, and there was this one patch towards the south end of our place that was a lot of cheatgrass, lots of cheatgrass. And it looked like it was mostly cheatgrass. And the lesson that I learned is, if it looks like it's mostly cheatgrass, it probably is. So we turned these cows out there, and this was in September, probably middle of September through the middle of October, I think. It's a little fuzzy, but it was all 2.5 months ago. Anyways, so we're strip grazing across here and grazing them back to a water point. And had a bull in with them. We synchronized them, AI'd them. I thought I'd skip having to have my own bull, so we synchronized them, AI'd them. Had some trouble again. Barbed wire fence. Bull kept jumping out of the barbed wire fence. Wasn't able to keep him in, so got tired of that. Took him back maybe a little sooner than I should have. Should have left him in a little longer. Probably in hindsight, what I should have done is left that land alone completely. but nothing had been on it since the middle of May. But anyways, what I should have done in hindsight is taken him out into the swaths and grazed them through that swath. And I think he would have been happier. There would have been more food. He would have stayed better fences around him. Lots of lessons learned here. But anyways, we synchronized them. We put in a cleanup bull, got tired of fighting to keep him in, took him back after just 21 days. So one cycle, exactly 21 days from the time we turned him in. Yeah. Had quite a few open cows, 3, so that's 33% of the cows and the heifers open. So yeah, just being brutally honest, sharing my failures, telling you what happened, some of the things I learned in that experience, and yeah, so there's a lot of what I've talked about already that it goes back to that. Maybe cows, Florida is a good rotation. Maybe bringing in outside cattle. Yeah, so these are 4-year-old cows, 1 3-year-old cow, and 2 4-year-old cows that came up open. They would have been coming 4s and 5s. So yeah, peak value, all of a sudden open. Yep, could have kept them around, added value to them, but some other things going on. Just felt it was best to let them go and take the hit. So lesson learned. But yeah, that's where one of the things I learned as far as managing nutrients being key. So longest solo episode in the history of Working Cows podcast. I'll just recap some of what I shared with you in the intro. My wife and I will be at the Ranching for Profit School in Cheyenne from January 17th, Cheyenne, Wyoming, that is, from January 17th to the 23rd. There's one spot left in that spot, or in that school. So if you want to check that out, you have to call at this point. It's not even on the list of schools you can register for online. Call 307-213-6010, 307-213-6010. Links to all that, links to some of the episodes and guests I mentioned in this podcast, links to some of my favorite equipment that I used this summer that I got from Livewire Fencing. Jacob Miller will be in the show notes page today at workingcows.net/167. workingcows.net/167 is the show notes page for today. And we'll see you next week. Really excited to have an episode with Dylan Biggs. I think it's not recorded yet, so there's always potential that it won't happen. But as of right now, I'm scheduled to talk about stock dogs, working dogs, with Dylan Biggs, and I'm trying to put together the first series since the first 3 episodes after the first 2 introductory episodes with Mary Jo Ehrman and Dallas Mount. I did a 3-episode series on winter feeding of cattle. We talked about swath grazing, we talked about bale grazing, and we talked about shredding hay in a strategic way across your landscape with Paul Youngnich, Dave Olila, and Melinda Sims. And so I've never accomplished another series since then. And so I am going to go back and try and do another series. And we're going to do a series on stock dogs. So Dylan Biggs coming back on the podcast, first time since episode 133. And just let me say this. This is what I said. As we move toward wrapping up, what does that mean from a preacher? Absolutely nothing. But let me say this. Here's evidence that we need not just more agricultural podcasts, not just more regenerative agricultural podcasts. We need more regenerative agriculture cow podcasts. Evidence, Exhibit A, first piece of evidence, the fact that Dylan Biggs has only been on the Working Cows podcast twice, or his next time will be his second appearance. That's Exhibit A. That we need more cow-focused regenerative agriculture podcasts. So if you want to take that up, I'd be happy to help you get it started. I've got a form letter that I send out to people a lot of times when they ask the question, and I try to tailor it to them. But usually I forget to edit out some things, and so some of the information isn't as relevant. But anyways, I will help you start your podcast if you want. So that is Dylan Biggs coming back on. Then I think David Neeson coming back again, also going to talk about stock dogs. And I've got a lead that I'm trying to track down on somebody who's talking about maintaining herd instinct in cows with stock dogs, and I'm trying to track that one down too. So that'll be a 3-part series on using stock dogs. So, so that's what's coming up on the Working Cows podcast. Check out the show notes page for links to all that and the phone number for Ranching for Profit Cheyenne. And we'll see you again real soon with another episode. Last thing, promise, I'm gonna hit the outro button last, and that's why I'm saying this last thing is because I've recorded this episode from start to finish, from the show number to the intro music to the whole episode. I've recorded it all on the Rode Rodecaster Pro. The Rode Rodecaster Pro. See, I've got a Rode Procaster microphone and a Rode Rodecaster Pro interface. And so I've recorded it all, and it's got sound pads in it, and it's the most desired piece of podcast equipment in the last 3 years. And one of my incredibly generous listeners went to my Amazon wish list and sent me this piece of equipment to use. And if you go out and track down what this thing's worth, it's an incredible gift. And I thank that individual so much. I don't have permission to share who it was, but I really appreciate it. And I've said it before, but if you want to check out the Amazon wish list, link to that will be also in the show notes page at workingcows.net/167. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.
That was a live recording rookie mistake. I should have started that sound pad earlier, but I'm just going to leave it in because what's the point of having a live production studio if you still have to go back and edit?